Welcome back to Normal, but Not. I'm your host, Crystal Centinello. I'm a trauma-informed boundaries, confidence, and empowerment coach, and a recovering people pleaser. Through this podcast, I guide you on redefining what's normal. Spoiler alert, most of it isn't, so you can reclaim your power and authenticity. Today's episode hits close to home for so many of us. We're talking about criticism. Specifically, is it normal to be sensitive to criticism? And if you grew up in a household where every visit, every conversation, or even your behavior was nitpicked or dissected, then this episode is for you. We'll dive into enmeshed family systems, explore how early experiences shape our sensitivity to criticism, and unpack why it's so hard to set boundaries without feeling like we're being mean. I'll share a personal story about hearing constant critiques, how it taught me to be a good girl, and how that pattern still shows up today. And of course, I've got actionable steps to help you break free from this cycle. Plus, don't forget my Trauma to Triumph Setting Boundaries That Transform in 1 hour workshop is coming up. Stick around to learn how it can help you set boundaries without feeling like a bitch. So, what does it mean to be sensitive to criticism? Let's start with that hard truth. Feeling sensitive to criticism can feel normal, but it's often not. I mean, a lot of times when we had family members tell us that we were too sensitive growing up, it's not that we were too sensitive, it's just that we had so much going around us that made us sensitive to it. So as secure adults who didn't have that kind of trauma, they aren't as sensitive to criticism as us recovering people pleasers. Many of us grew up in environments where subtle or even overt criticism was the norm. Maybe it came from a parent who overtly commented on your clothes, your grades, your hobbies, or perhaps it wasn't even about you, but it was about others, right? Those constant whispers of, did you see what she was wearing? Or I can't believe they let their child out of the house without a hat on. This felt normal, right? Because we were constantly surrounded by it. We didn't know that there was any other way. And it was also possible that we had friends whose families were just like this. But it's not normal. And it doesn't have to be, especially if you are now a parent, you don't have to repeat these same cycles. What this did was it taught you that you were always being observed, always being judged, always being evaluated. Dr. Nicole LaPera, if you haven't heard of her, she is the holistic psychologist. She's on Instagram. She's got some great books out, How to Do the Work. She's got a workbook. I think a new third book has come out. She's fantastic. She talks about this pattern and how it often develops in enmeshed family systems. She defines enmeshment as families where personal boundaries are blurred and individuals are sacrificed for the sake of the family unit. In these systems, criticism becomes a tool to enforce conformity. As a child, you learn to avoid that criticism by overperforming, people-pleasing, and hiding your true self. I've experienced this firsthand, along with so many of my clients. And what it looked like for me was oftentimes in the car ride home after leaving a party, of whether it was like a good friend or a loved one, it took not even 2 seconds, not even leaving the driveway, and the comments would start. It would be about someone who looked a certain way, or the snacks that were served, or rather weren't served, and maybe the people who didn't quite have it together. It taught me that there was a right way to behave and a wrong way to behave. The right way to behave would avoid all of that criticism of everyone else who would leave my house when I was an adult, when I was hosting a party, or out in the real world, how I could behave so that people wouldn't talk behind my back, so that I wouldn't have judgment brought about me. That is how your good girl script gets written. So how does this link between enmeshed families and people pleasing get made? Aside from what I've already talked about, there's a little bit more to it. So in enmeshed families, the boundaries are really non-existent. No one in the family says, "Stop, I don't like this." It's not allowed. You're all together. You might be in a family who the bathroom door is never closed and you're all brushing your teeth and going to the bathroom and showering at the same time. And there may not be anything wrong with it, but it's also not necessarily normal. When you add to that, you get this criticism that gets disguised as self-care. For example, a parent who says to you, "Oh, sit, but put your shoulders up, fix your posture," might say, "I just want the best for you." When they're constantly criticizing your posture, or they're constantly criticizing, "Well, are you sure you want your hair like that?" They're just coming from a place of wanting the best. But it actually comes out as, you're never going to succeed if you don't sit up straight, if you don't comb your hair regularly, if you don't fill in the blank. Or maybe there's a family member who is teasing you in front of others or behind closed doors, and it's hurting your feelings because the normal thing is to have your feelings hurt by someone teasing you. But what's not normal is it to be a close family member. And when you speak up and you say, "I don't like that," and in a enmeshed family system, that is not allowed. The enmeshed family says, "Oh, I kid because I care." And what happens is that later, it sets you up to be in a relationship with somebody who teases you in public, who teases you behind closed doors. And you have this record playing in the back of your mind that they kid because they care. Not the part that should be, people shouldn't be making fun of you if they love you, or if you've set a boundary to say, "Stop that, I don't like that." But you've already lost the boundary setting because someone already told you that they don't want you to set the boundary, so you stopped. You stopped it as a young child. Now, Terry Real, I know I talk about this guy all the time. He is an expert on family systems and relationships. He explains that in these environments, children feel trapped. You either comply and lose yourself, or you rebel and you face rejection. Think about that. You comply so that you have a sense of belonging, but you lose who you are so that you can fit in with your family. Or you rebel and you fear they possibly reject you. You become the black sheep and you're no longer part of everybody else. For people pleasers, compliance is a safer route. Some family members may have been an independent from the beginning and they don't care if they're compliant or not. They don't care, or at least on the surface, maybe don't come across as caring. That's for a different episode, a different podcast entirely. I was not that person. That constant fear of being criticized can make setting boundaries feel impossible. We've talked about this on past episodes, that fear of rejection, that fear of being disliked. Add in the layer of fear of criticism. Setting a boundary is impossible. So if you grew up hearing, "Don't be so sensitive," or "Stop being dramatic," you might now hesitate to speak up for fear of being labeled as selfish or unkind. Does this resonate for you? For me, it showed up in my relationships. I became a chameleon, changing my preferences and personality to match with the people I dated around me. I didn't want to be rejected by them or criticized or made fun of. I mean, not even just romantic relationships, but friendships. I wanted to like what everyone else liked. I was the easygoing one. Oh, you can take Crystal anywhere. She's easy because I didn't want to be criticized for choosing a food for an appetizer that nobody else liked. Not like that now, but it's not an easy road to get there. There's a lot of two steps forward, one step back, or one step forward, two steps back. So let me give you some actionable steps to start breaking free. This is just a taste. And if you still want more, you can always come to my Trauma to Triumph workshop, which is really geared for anyone who's listening. But if you've grown up in an enmeshed family system, you've had narcissists in your past, you're going to want more than just these steps here. But for now, take your notepad out, your phone, whatever it is you want to take notes on, get ready to jot these down. Number one, identify the source of your sensitivity. This didn't come from nowhere. Ask yourself, whose voice am I hearing when I fear criticism? Often it's not your own voice. Maybe it was a parent, a teacher, an older or younger sibling, or someone else from your past. Identify that voice, maybe even write it down. Maybe you'll start seeing a pattern. Number two, challenge the narrative. So you've identified the voice. Dr. LaPera encourages people to reframe the criticism as feedback instead. So, say it was a teacher who was criticizing your posture, for example. Rather than criticism, think about it as feedback. Oh, maybe I'm not sitting up straight. But here's the second part. Instead of internalizing it and feeling bad about it, ask yourself, is this true? Am I? No, I wasn't sitting up straight. Now, the next part. Does it align with my values? Now, I'm picking something very surface level. So, does it align? Do I want to feel hunched over? No, I don't. Okay, I'm going to sit up straight. Once you can identify that that's your own voice now, it does align with your values, even if it started with somebody you might hate from your past or you're resentful about. If you can identify that is now your voice, it takes the power away from that person. Now, if the opposite is true, whatever X is, you can say, is this true? Whether the answer is yes or no. The next part is, let's say it's yes. The next part is, does this align with my values? If the answer is no, then you don't have to go along with it anymore. So let me give you a relatable example here. Also a little surfacey, but I think those are easier examples to work with. So say you're dating somebody and the thing that pops into your head is somebody chewing with their mouth open. Okay. So you think to yourself, criticism versus feedback, and you're thinking about the other person, right? This is something you might have heard on that car ride home or at the dinner table, those constant critiques, whether it was about you or somebody else. And the thing that's playing in your mind is people who chew with their mouth open must be bad. So you think to yourself, are people who chew with their mouth open bad? No, that doesn't make them bad. Does having a date who chews with their mouth open something that you want to be around? Now, if your answer to this one is no, I don't, then you can walk away. That aligns with your values. If it's something where you're like, you know what, I don't care if they chew with their mouth open, that's fine with me. That is also your voice. And so you can say, you know what, mom, dad, cousin, whoever it was that was saying those words, chewing with their mouth open doesn't make them bad. And I'm going to make sure that this person is the person I keep dating. There's a whole other thing about bringing them around your parents. But let's get past date number one before we revisit that. Number three, practice small acts of boundaries. I know this one comes up every episode, but there's a reason for it. Start with something small, like saying, I need some time to think about that. Or I need a few minutes to think about that. When someone asks you for a favor, write this one down because yes is usually the first response. I'm not going to commit yet. These are great small boundary phrases. And lastly, number 4, release the fear of sounding mean. Okay. Boundaries aren't about being unkind. They're about creating clarity. So if you're giving someone a roadmap to how to treat you or what you need, that is not being unkind. And it's all about tone and body language. So you can say things 2 ways, right? Or multiple ways. You can say, I need a few minutes to think about that. Or you can say, I need a few minutes to think about that. It's all in the tone. The words are the same. So how do you do it without sounding mean? Just use your natural tone. You've gone this far through life without sounding like a bitch. You're probably not going to sound like one now. Setting boundaries is definitely a skill. And you know it's hard to do it without feeling like a bitch, especially if you view other people who set boundaries as bitchy, or you've been told in the past every time you have tried to set a boundary that you've been a bitch. That's one of the reasons I've created From Trauma to Triumph workshop. It's how you will set boundaries that will transform. It's an hour-long workshop, and it will help you to set those boundaries where you can feel empowered, you can still feel kind and guilt-free. Now, as I mentioned before, if you have been in an abusive relationship, you've dealt with narcissists, you have been in an enmeshed family system, this workshop is for you. You can get the details on my website. It is linked here in the show notes. It's on January 26th, live. Criticism might feel normal, but it's not. It's not healthy. It is not healthy to be around people who are criticizing. And neither is the sensitivity we develop to avoid it. Criticism can be constructive when done with the right intentions. By understanding these patterns that we grew up with and taking small steps to set boundaries, we can reclaim our sense of self. We've lost it, I know. So let's get back to reclaiming that. On our next episode, we're going to be answering the question, is it normal to become a people pleaser after growing up with an easily angered parent? So it's not just about criticism, but it's about parents who are easy to anger. If that feels like you or you know somebody, please let them know about the episode and come check it out next week. Until then, head to my website, crystalsentinello.com/quiz to access my free quiz, Are You a People Pleaser? It's the perfect next step to start your journey. If you fill out your name and email address, you'll get access to upcoming workshops, free downloads, and some other fun things that are coming along the way. I look forward to getting to know you better. Send me a DM at Complete Coaching with Crystal. Thanks for listening to Normal But Not.